There's only a few people who have lived an amazing life, so amazing and so wonderful that is worth to talk about. And today we're going to talk about one of the most amazing actors who have lived in all the history in cinema. Not only he was one of the most famous antagonists in the history of cinema, not only in horror, fantasy, science fiction, and many, many more. His name was Sir Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee was born the 27th of May of 1922 in a wealthy family. His dad was an colonel in the British Army who fought in the World War One, and his mother was an Italian aristocracy. And a curious fact, he was descendant of Carlo Magno, one of the emperors of the Roman German Empire. In his childhood, his parents divorced, but that didn't stop the potential of Christopher. He was one of the students and he was an athlete in sports like soccer, swimming, fencing, cricket, and squash. And also he was linguist. He could speak a fluent German, Spanish, French, and Italian. And also he can speak a little bit of Greek, Finnish, and a bit of Chinese. In between this period of time when Christopher was still studying, her mother got married with a famous banker who was relative to Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond. When he finished school, he searched for a scholarship in the Eton College. In the interview with the headmaster, M.R. James, he was amazed by the method he used for manipulating with his body language and especially with his deep voice. In 1937, Christopher Lee, in his biography, talks about how he was witness to see the last execution in the guillotine of Eugene Weidman, the last man who was executed in the guillotine in France. After that, he was a volunteer in the Finnish army who fought against the Soviet Union Winter War, but at the same time, the World War II was in that moment present, and he was a volunteer in the Royal Air Force. But since he, with his eyes, was discharged of the armies, but thanks to the influences of his cousin Ian Fleming, he became part of the Special Operation Executive, which main goal was to hunt Nazi soldiers and generals who work in concentration camps. So he was a spy and he hunt Nazis and killed them in the process. After the war, he became an actor, making small roles. In between 1956, he met Peter Cushing, who was one of his best friends, and both were signed into Hammer Productions. Both Cushing and Lee were attracted to making horror films. But it was until 1958 who gained his first main role as Count Dracula. And thanks to that role, he became famous and the Hammer make a lot of productions and movies with Christopher Lee as Dracula. But at the same time, he made The Mummy and he was also well received to the public and critics thanks to the skills of acting of Christopher Lee and also his penetrating look. After the Dracula era of Christopher Lee in 1974, he was the antagonist in the film James Bond and the Man with the Golden Gun as the antagonist Francisco Scaramanga. Lee always wanted to be portrayed in one of the James Bond films as Ian Fleming was his cousin. Then in 2001 he get one of his major roles in all modern cinema history. He was Saruman the White in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. There's a curious fact about Christopher Lee. He was a major fan of the books of Lord of the Rings, but he's the only actor and person in the production who really met J.R.R. Tolkien. He met him when he was younger in a pub in London. Both have a beer and talk about how he had a love and passion for the Lord of the Rings and how
Join
he always read once a year.
We must
And when
join
Christopher
this.
Lee knew that they're gonna make a Lord of the Rings movie, he wanted to be Gandalf the Grey. But since Christopher Lee was an elderly person at that moment, Peter Jackson, the director, convinced him to be Saruman the White.
And to explain to him what I wanted. So I started to go into this long explanation about what sort of sound he should make when he got stabbed.
I seem to recall that I did say to Peter, have you any idea of what kind of noise happens when somebody's stabbed in the back? And I said, well, because I do.
Oh, yeah. You see, it's not, like that.
It's because the breath's driven out of your body.
He proceeded to sort of talk about some very